Now, we all dream of that monster buck walking by a rut stand, and you know, let's face it, a lot of us, we're going in haphazard, end of October, setting up, and really, you know, trying, when I think there's a lot better approach to that, and that is really planning your rut sits right now. And we talk about another video, planning your rutcation, and how to use 3 weekends instead of a week off to really maximize your time of field and give you a lot higher chance at success for a mature buck, especially a target buck. But bottom line is, when it comes to hanging a rut stand, these are some of the ingredients you need to hang a stand right now, leave it alone, come back and have a great hunt during the rut this fall. First thing I want to look at, and one of the major ingredients, it's not on a food source. Now I need to back up. A lot of you are unfortunately really excited because you just put a nice blind, a nice stand right on a food plot. And if it's a big enough food plot where it's attracting a lot of deer at the time in the morning and afternoon when you're trying to get in and out, then it's a bad rut stand, because you need to be able to go in, backdoor entrance, get into a really nice spot in the woods in the morning and sit, sometimes whether it's the morning or all day, and have a great hunt. If it's on food, you're already spooking deer when you get in there. Now, if it's on a small hunting plot and you have big food plots several hundred yards away, that might be a different story, but that's more the exception than the rule. So right off the bat, if it's on a food source, probably not the best rut hunting spot. Between food and bedding, or between bedding and bedding. So what I like to see is you have an interior spot, a corner, a point where you think that deer, especially a buck, is going to bed, or does and fawns. Then over here is another bedding area, and you have that constriction in between. Could be an inside corner of a field where you have a field that actually, oh, Dylan, you can see that, but oh, yeah. Fields right here, woods all around out here, and that creates an inside corner right here. What that does is bucks will cruise that corner back and forth, and it makes an X of movement. That X of movement, if it's between, you have bedding area in the distance, bedding area in the distance. This field is a grassy field, something just low cover, you can slip in and out. That can be an exceptional rut hunting spot. Between bedding areas. Instead of sitting on the food source, food plot, you're sitting between there and the bedding area. That makes it kind of nice too, because deer will focus coming from that food source, let's say you're 100, 200 yards away in the morning, and then going back to that food source in the afternoon. So it can give you a good all-day hunt potentially. Sometimes between bedding areas, backside of bedding, exceptional morning hunt, but then those deer are leaving that location and going back to food, so the closer it gets to dark, the less likely they are to see actual bucks cruising. It's still a great rut hunt though, because I'm focusing on the morning. Think about that stand location where you're at. Where does it connect to bedding areas, especially known buck bedding areas? Can you imagine a mature buck? Now, don't think of a rut-crazed buck. Think of a buck that's actually being stealthy, a mature old monster. In that stand location you're at, can you imagine him leaving his most secure bedding area and coming all the way to your stand location and having secure travel the entire way, meaning he's not crossing open fields, open hardwoods, roads, backside of someone's house. He actually has secure travel where he can feel comfortable going from point A to point B. That's another test of a great rut stand. Non-food access. Not only are you not sitting on a food plot, but I don't want to go past a giant food plot to get to my stand for a morning hunt. You know, I keep saying morning. You know, morning sit, the next point. I probably have shot about 70% of my mature buck, my oldest bucks. If I had to look at my top 35, 40 bucks, they're going to be in the morning. 70% of the time, even though I only sit about 25% of the time on a morning stand location. And that's why it's so critical to develop those morning spots. Bucks move around about 3 times more in the morning hours than they do the afternoon hours. So it creates a great opportunity for you to get a good look at a cruising monster during the morning. And that's why I prioritize that. And that's why it's really hard to go through a giant food source in the morning. Those bucks, deer herd in general are already there. So a lot of times you're spooking out your hunt before it even begins. So really try to pick a stand location where you can go well around a big food source and get into in between bedding, in between food and bedding. Put yourself in that position where you can imagine a buck going through. And then finally, at the end, you take that spot and you can sweeten it with a water hole, mock scrape, or both. I always use a mock scrape in a location, but if it's an area where I don't have water, another stand within 300 or 400 yards, it's an area that features dry, movement between bedding, between food and bedding, then it's a perfect spot for a water hole, even if you have water 100 yards away, because that's not in the movement. So consider looking for a sweetener. If you're on public land, try to find that sweetener, whether it's a scrape or maybe a natural water hole that you can hunt over. And then finally, when you're setting this stand up right now, June, July, you're setting it to leave. Overcut, meaning you're making larger openings. These are some tips that Dylan brought in. We were talking about this at the end. Make sure you install hangers right now for your bow, for your gear, whatever you're doing. Making sure when you slip in, you can be ultra quiet. And then of course your safety line. That's all installed right now. So that when you sneak in there, like you set this up, I have a lot of stands I've set up anywhere from May to July. And then I'm not going back to that stand until the rut to actually hunt it. And that's the first time I go back in there. Some dark morning, it's cold, really cold. You know, that's where I talk about right here in that morning set. I'm waiting for that first nice cold. It might be that first frosty morning in the north end of October. It might be your first time. It's in the 30s, 40s down south. But bottom line is you're picking that time where it's cold. You're going in the morning. It's already a pre-hung stand. You don't want to use a climber in a situation like that. You don't want to have a lot of gear that you're monkeying around with. Unless you're on public land, maybe you do that. But if you're all set up on private land, you're sneaking in, hangers are there, ready to go, and you're putting yourself in a position to hunt and harvest a giant mature buck this rut, and you're planning for it in June or July using these ingredients. Try it out. That's what I do almost every year. We're always looking for that next great morning rut stand. I think you can find it now, set up, and it'll pay off big time when you enter that stand during a frosty, cold, toe-numbing morning this fall. Hey folks, I really appreciate you watching, and I want to invite you to check out our main website, whitetailhabitatsolutions.com. I'm going to miss all these, but we have seed to offer, hats, articles, web classes, books, consultations, and even a new podcast. I think we have 17 podcasts out there right now for you to listen to. So we have a lot to offer. Most of all, if you don't want to buy anything, I'm going to keep offering free videos, free articles. We have over 600 articles on the site. And most of all, thank you very much for watching, reading, listening, being a part of Whitetail Habitat Solutions. If you want to check this stuff out, awesome. Links are in the description.